Hi, it's Warren Hewitt here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Today we're at LARS, which is the Los Angeles Recording School. It's part of the Los Angeles Film School. And they have a wonderful audio program here. And my friend Jason McDonald let us come here to do a lesson on patch bays. Now, the reason why I came here is because my 4,000 patch bays you've probably seen in the background is like a spider's web of annoyances. And frankly, I looked at it and thought to myself, if I start pulling that thing apart, it's going to take me about a week to figure out how to patch it all back in together. It's kind of permanently patched in the way that I like to mix and track, and I'm a little afraid of it. It's been set that way for several years now. So Jason very kindly let us come here and use his SSL Duality. And it's a beautiful console. It's a newer version of my 4000. And it's a very flexible console with tons of different ways to route. Has a center section here where you can route in all kinds of different ways. You can send pre-fade, post-fade, you name it. And all of that is available over here on this lovely patch bay. The great thing about this patch bay is it allows us full access to everything that console can do and everything that all of this equipment over here can do. You've got Pro Tools inputs and outputs. You've got different multi-effects that appear on here, compressors, EQs, external mic pre's, you name it. Even some keys and DI inputs and outputs, and the two different live rooms to the left and right of the console. Everything comes up on this patch bay. A student can come in here, learn this patch bay, and this basic principle of these patch bays could be applied to any other commercial facility anywhere in the world. So it's very well laid out, and it's a good way for us to talk about how patch bays work, and I can show you basically how my patch bay is laid out and how any patch bay that you're going to get is laid out. Also great tips for you, because if you want to turn your private studio into a commercial facility, you're going to want to take some of these tips here. So let's get stuck into the patch bay. Here the mic lines are feeding from the live rooms. I think there's two live rooms here. The slightly larger one, which is over to my left, is where they would probably do drums, etc. And then over to the right, guitar overdubs, vocals, pianos, etc. Probably even drums in there. It's big enough to do a smaller drum kit and get a nice tight live room sound. Okay, so you've got your mic line inputs here, of which there's 48. And then your channel inputs there. Normally, this would be normalized, which means if you don't actually break it, so if I take a cable here, I don't need to do this. Basically, this, is plugging input 1 into channel 1. If it's normalized, which I'm sure it is, those will actually always be connected unless I break it. So say, for instance, I wanted to use a different mic pre other than the one that comes in the console. I would then come out of the mic line and go into the X81 here. There's a mic input here. Like this. And then I could either chain a compressor, say if it was the kick in and I wanted to put a little compression on it. I could come out here, my output's on the bottom, and go to the input of, say, the 160X, which is typical for me. I use a 160 a lot. And then come out of the 160. So then I would come back in to my line input, which they've labeled monitor input. I suppose they're labeling it like that because, if this was a mix down, that's another way of talking about it. But that's our line input on here. So it could either be called monitor input or more typically line input. So come back in here. So once again, let's do this slowly. Our mic lines are from our mic panels. So mic output here, mic line output 1, is from our kick drum. And we're going to take that, follow all the way down here to a mic pre here, which is the X81, which is a Vintech Neve simulation. So the input is on the top, and then that's coming out here to the 160, DBX 160X, into the input on the top, and then the output here going back into monitor in, which is actually line input. You'll see that more commonly written as line input. And that is breaking the normal. Otherwise, channel 1 here, the mic line output, coming from the panel, so this is the mic panel here, would normally be normalized. So if I pull that, now it's going straight to input channel 1 on the console, which is over here. That's very typical on any console. And the reason for that is it makes the most amount of sense. If I've got a console like this, and for me personally, when I'm doing drums, I like to try and use as many of the same mic pre's as possible. So if you have a really nice Class A or a nice console like this SSL here, it's nice if you can get all the drums going through it, because every pre is the same. The transient response time will be the same on every single one. So those drums tend to hit really percussively and concussively. However, there might be instances, where you want to try a different mic pre. A Neve or a Neve simulated mic pre like that will have a little bit more girth and bottom end. So it might be nice to do that on the kick in particular. So if we have one or two, kick mics, we might want to add those. The snare as well might be nice to get that kind of extra girth. But that is a typical way that you would set up your patch bay. Next here is the Pro Tools outputs. Now obviously these again will be normalized to the monitor inputs, i.e. the line inputs. So when you're mixing, if you just want to just use the console's compression and EQ and then do stuff in the box, putting some additional EQ and compression and everything, great, just leave it as it is. However, if you want to do a similar thing, let's just say you want to hear some hardware, some real compressors, some real EQs, exactly the same process. We could take the Pro Tools output here of say 1. Maybe we've summed all our kick drums together onto 1. There's not many good 160 simulations, to be honest. I've known a few DBX ones, so let's just say it wasn't recorded with the 160 and we wanted to hear it. We could do the same patch. So we could go into the 160X here. And again, because we've broken normal, we'll come out the output here and then back into the line input, the monitor input here. Great. So exactly the same process. We're patching the 160 in to use for compression. We pull it, it's normal. Put it back in, and we've inserted it through the hardware. If we wanted to, we could do exactly the same process using the channel insert sends. So we could do it on the channel, like such. So we could just literally use the console's EQ, compression and everything, and if we wanted to insert effects or compression and EQ, we could do exactly the same patch. The thing about using the Pro Tools outputs is we can get a little crazier because we can sum and bus stuff in a different way to we might do in the console. So you could do unique things and then come back into the console in a different way. So there's a lot of flexibility. That's really the bottom line with patch bays. And the whole idea of a patch bay is having all of these amazing different ways to get in and out of signal so that you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. There's no rules. If you wanted to sum, take a stereo pair on Pro Tools here, whether it be 1 and 2, 13, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever, and do something inside of Pro Tools, and then have that go through some different compression and EQ, which is available, and then bring it back into line inputs, you could do that. Then you're doing stuff inside of Pro Tools and you're not necessarily using the console, because consoles are fantastic, but each of them work in different ways. This one in particular we were talking about earlier is all assignable, but not on the channel strip. It's assignable through a matrix system in the middle there. And let's just say you have a particular way of working and you have a session that you've opened up from a different console. You might not have all of that available, but you may have already done busing and hardware inserts and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So the great thing about having a really, comprehensive patch bay like this is you'll be able to simulate things and move easily from one studio to another. That's the great thing about professional studios, is they try to cover every eventuality. Typically and professionally, sends were always on the top and returns always on the bottom. I have seen them around the other way in some places. Usually, people that have built their own studio stuff, but typically we would take a channel insert send, and that would be in this, on a mix down, I don't personally insert like that when I'm tracking. I would want that to come out of the mic lines into a compressor, back into a channel input when I was tracking. But you could insert if you wanted like that, but I would advise it. This would be a mix down situation. So the direct outputs on the channel here, same thing. And on this particular console, on this SSL, it is assignable, so we could make these whatever we wanted to. They could be pre-fade or post-fade. You know, I probably typically would, because you've got inserts here, I would only really see a necessity for this if I wanted to do something post-fade, because this is already going to be, you know, typically I would do that. I would insert and then have fader control of compression. The audio signal would be compressed and I'd want a fader control over it. So maybe I would insert an effect there, but maybe I wanted something, you know, post-fade on a mix that could be kind of fun. You know, having a volume ride going into into another compressor to do a specific effect, or an EQ or distortion or whatever. However, this is all, once again, all personal taste. You know, you've really got a million different ways of doing things here. You know, you could insert compression here. You could also have compression on, you know, a channel output which is pre or post fade. It really is completely controllable to you. So the Pro Tools input here is our Pro Tools input. However, it is normalized. So just like the mic lines here coming from the panels are normalized to the channel inputs are normalized to Pro Tools input 1. So here I'm selecting on the top one what I was selecting, whether I wanted to use, you know, if I stay like this, it uses the SSL mic pre. If I break the normal, I can then select a different mic pre. The same thing here is on Pro Tools input. So I could break the input, or it's just normalized to Pro Tools in. So if I wanted to come out of the channel out here, once it's assigned on the console, I could come out of a direct output assigned pre or post fade, maybe in this instance post fade, and come out of this channel output and do another compression or EQ or something. You know, and the reason which is nice for this is just to say I'm already using all these things. I've done something, I'm tracking and I'm not happy. It might be a quick and easy fix to just insert something else. You know, somebody might come in and put in a piece of rack gear, and I just might want to compress lightly after even doing a couple of fun things down here. It gives me one more quick option without having to unpatch like 5 cables, 6 cables. I could just add another compressor or an external piece of equipment and then go into the Pro Tools input. Again, a lot of flexibility on a patch bay is a good thing. Okay, so next here we have track bus outputs. Now, these are the bus outputs from the console. They're assignable, obviously, from the console, from each individual channel, from wherever you want it to be. The way that this particular studio is set up is the track bus outputs are normalized to the Studer inputs. They have a 24-track Studer, an 827, which is a great machine. It's the last machine they make. They did also make a gold model above it, but essentially the same machine. So it's an 827. You can assign these, obviously, from any channel, anywhere on the console. This particular SSL is assignable in a very unique way from a particular, like an old Neve analog console, which the bus assignments would be, assignable on the channel. This one you can sit there and assign all kinds of craziness and really go nuts on it. But you're going to see this kind of thing quite often because here in the modern world we've got a tape machine and Pro Tools. So the way they're doing it is they're coming out of the channel bus assignments, which of course could be multed from many channels. They could have 3 kick inputs printing down to 1. Because obviously it's a 24-track machine, so if they're recording a live band with a lot of inputs, they could have some fun multing stuff on the console, then printing into the Studer, and because it's only 24 ins. In this day and age, that's not very many inputs, in the digital world. When I grew up as a kid, that was a lot. We aspired to having 24 channels. Wow, you've got 24 channels. That's incredible. Now, of course, it's like, oh, you've only got 24 inputs. Anyway, so again, normalized, and you could break that normal You could go in, you could do compression before going into. You could do all the compression and EQ you want using channel inserts and all that kind of fun stuff, and then do it again going into the Studer. The Studer could have a different, set of EQ and compression going into it that could be set up permanently. You could do all kinds of fun stuff. So, again, a lot of flexibility and very useful to have. Next is our mix insert. So we have 3 mix buses on our SSL here. SSL's always had this facility. It's one of the great things about SSL mixing. Like with a drum mix, quite often you can either bus it and have a drum mix come back on a pair of faders, but what a lot of people do is have that drum mix come up on its own stereo fader, then compress and EQ that, and then fold that back into the main mix. What is typical is, A is your stereo mix bus, but then these other 2 mix buses here, B and C, could be, B could be my drum mix. So I could have that go to a stereo mix and do the same thing. Come out of that SSL stereo mix and go into some compression. So I could do some external compression or limiting, and then that inside of the SSL bus matrix would be folded back into A. Again, obviously the SSL would probably have a 4000 bus compressor, but if you did want to try a different bus compressor, you can do the same thing on mix bus A here. You could use another external compressor and EQ, etc. A lot of flexibility there. And of course, this is normalized. So, you're going to, it's always going to come back regardless of this, but once you plug in here, you break the normal and you can go into whatever fun stuff you want. To the right here is external source inputs on the, again, this is very to do with whichever console it is. Each console can have different inputs and outputs, assignable to it. We don't have to go into the detail of this stuff because whatever this console has available may not be what's available on other consoles, but there may be different inputs and outputs that are available on it. Yeah, so these are all external listening sources. So, you could have an RCA input coming in here from an iPod. It could be a CD player. If you've still got one, a DAT player, you name it, different external inputs. It's nice to have those available. And obviously, this is designed as a commercial facility, but if this wasn't a commercial facility, I could have this permanently hooked up to different ways of listening. My laptop could be plugged in, the computer output could be coming in. There could be a floating 3.5 millimeter mini jack for different people to plug in their reference sources, as artists come in. It's a fun thing to have. And again, this is available to this SSL, but different consoles will have different external inputs. Here's the mix outputs. So these aren't normaled anywhere, which is typical. These aren't normal to a particular stereo pair of Pro Tools inputs, but let's just say A obviously is our main mix bus. We could come out of A here, and let's go back and find our Pro Tools in. And our last input here here's our Pro Tools in, is down here, so 47. And this would be post compression if we were running compression on our inserts, etc. And here we go. So that's your patch. So there's your patch coming out of mix outputs from the SSL. A, left, right, so that's AL, AR, going into 47 and 48, and that could be my print input on Pro Tools. Now, you could also bring in, I use a Lavry for my stereo mix. Maybe you could bring in your own, Apogee two-track input, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's how you would get to it. So I would get to this, out of here. Again, if you wanted to, there's no reason why you couldn't also insert a compressor or an EQ across that. Again, a similar situation. You may have your compression EQ set up, you're loving it, but you just want to add a limiter. So rather than taking all your chain out, you come out of here, you go into your new limiter. These can go to obviously to XLRs, go into a limiter, patch in quickly, put it in there, or a limiter may be inserted somewhere in here. The bottom line is this gives you a lot of flexibility to do whatever you want when you're moving quickly, especially as an assistant and you're an assistant engineer, this is a quick way of doing things and not having to sit there, when the client is wanting something done like that and you're unpatching tons and tons of stuff to potentially make a mistake, which we all do. This is like, oh, he wants to add like a limiter, boom, straight into that limiter, back in, off you go. Okay, so the monitor insert sends here, 5-1. So we have left, right, center, low frequency effect, then left surround and right surround. So that's for our 5-1. Now, this we believe is just set up, if you wanted to insert some additional compression across those. Personally, or EQ, personally, I don't know if I would ever need that, but it's available if you want it. This is a whole bunch of stuff here, again, just to show the comprehensiveness of this patch bay. You've got the main mixers here. Again, we can come out here. We could go into different power amps, different powered speakers. It gives us a lot of ways of. If you brought in some different speakers and you didn't want to unpatch these, you just sat a pair of powered speakers on top of the ones that are here. You could just come out of that patch straight into the back of it. So this is just a lot of different ways of doing stuff. So next, we have our effect sends. We have 2 stereo cues, and we have 4 independent effect sends, which are on the console. Now, the stereo cues would typically be headphones. So you create a stereo cue mix. You could have 2 independent mixes like that. 99% of the time when you're doing vocals, you'll have a board mix that you can send to the singer. And then on his channel, his or her channel, you can then send a little bit more, monitor mix that way. Again, everybody works differently. But most of the time in doing vocals, I send a 2-track mix that I'm listening to, and then I give the singer a little bit more on my SSL. That would be one of many ways that I could send a headphone mix would be out of my cues. So I could have a stereo cue coming up on the console. So if you look over here very quickly, see the stereo cue. I could set up a stereo cue, that would be my headphone mix. And then maybe what I could do is send a little bit more, off a different one as well, just to and fold that back in, and you won't have any phase issues. It's coming off the console. There's no digital plugins and stuff in the way. That's the great thing about analog equipment is, Jim Scott once said it to me, he goes, how come I can't just send from 3 different directions in Pro Tools like I can from a console without having to use delay compensation or time adjuster and stuff? That is the one thing about digital that we always have to look out for, is we can get that slight phasing, and sometimes delay compensation when you're running a lot of plugins isn't capable of handling it because you're right maxed out. The great thing about using an analog piece of equipment, that's still great, is that you can send out from all these thousands of different ways, tons of compressions and EQ, and it all comes back in, and there's no perceptible phase issues. Now, maybe somebody, would argue there would be, but to be honest, the differences are so negligible, compared with the issues I might get inside of my DAW doing that same kind of thing. Interesting, they have multi-effects here. So if this was I was mixing and I used my 4 effect sends, because they have a PCM 96, SBX inputs here, I could go into my inputs of my effects here, and then it looks like they've got the output set back there. As you can see here on this SSL, the effects returns are back here. They call them echo returns that would come up in the console. You could come back in on channels. A lot of people like to do multi-effects on channels because when you have faders available, you might want to do some fun stuff. It's so much easier to do it here, to have a reverb that is assigned coming here. And I might want to do a quick push, like on the end of a phrase, maybe the vocal's fading out and I want to, and I want the verb to come up. I could do a little automation of the verb as the vocal's fading. It's really up to you. That is the bottom line with a patch bay. That's why we have a patch bay, is to have everything available here so we can do all kinds of fun stuff. There's no rules. If you want to come out of that effects send, go into a compressor, into an EQ, then go into a multi-effects and then come back on fader, you can do it. If you want to just come out of that effects send and use it to do something completely, maybe you're running out of ways to monitor oh no, I need another way for somebody to hear themselves, another headphone mix. Use the effects send. That's what this is for. It could be called an effects send, but it could also be another way to get to John over there who's just turned up for the kazoo solo and he needs his own independent headphone mix. Use the effects send. That's the great thing about Patch Bay. Here is, some stuff which is very typical. And it's just really here now in these last few patch bays here. This is just to illustrate the flexibility of this particular studio. They have, equipment that is just their equipment. Guitar pod. They've got a DI output here, for DIs that are hardwired in here. They have the 960, lexicon available, the inputs and the outputs available here. So here is like different ways to get into multi-effects and keyboards. Here, this is all available. These are open inputs, 25 to 32, which we could patch anything we like in. Here's the mults. Now, what are the mults? Here's the mults. This is a trick I always like to do. Let's just say we're coming out of 24 on our mic line. So this is a panel here. There's a lead vocal coming in here. I might come out of this. I might go to, let's do something kind of crazy-ish here. Let's go and find, here it is, mic line input on our external mic pre. So I'm going to come out of my mic line output, the line output there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. That's my lead vocal. I'm going to go into a mult, like such. Now, that mult, all of these four here are all wired together, I think is the dumb way of describing it. So now what I want to do is like that input, these three outputs now, these are now three outputs to do whatever I want to. Simple as that. I'm going to come out of that. Let's get some extra cables. And I'm going to do some parallel compression. Now, let's have a look. What do I have two of? Perfect. So I have two 1176s. So I'm going to go into 1176, the first one, and I'm going to set up some light compression. And then that is going to come out and go into mult 2. This might take some re-explaining. Okay, now I'm going to come out on the second mult 1 and go into the other 1176 input here, come out of that 1176, back into mult 2. Now I'm setting up these two 1176s differently. This one 1176 is going to have light compression that is only coming in when the singer screams. It hits when he's screaming or she's screaming. The other one here is compressing on all of the softer stuff. So basically, I'm setting up compression to happen no matter whether the singer is belting or singing softly. And I set up the output so that it's always giving me a good hot signal. Now, you might ask why. Well, what it does is it gives me a fat tone all of the time. So now, both of those outputs are going into mult 2. And mult 2, this now is an output as well. Now mult 2 is going to go into a monitor input 24, my line input. So now what I'm doing, and that's normalized to Pro Tools. I could go straight into Pro Tools if I wanted here. I could do Pro Tools in here as well. But it's normalized, so if I wanted to come in there and then use any kind of facility that the SSL has, I could do that. But there you go. So let's go through that again slowly, and why a mult is really cool and very useful. Might take some double explaining. I'm coming out of output 24, which is one of my mic panels. So let's just say that my vocal is patched into 24 on my mic panel. I'm coming out of that into a mic pre here. So there's the mic input here, coming out of the line output from that mic pre into the first mult. You see that? Mult 1. Now, that mult is allowing me to have two outputs. So these two outputs are going into two different sets of compressors, two 1176s, 1176A and 1176B. I'm setting up those compressors in two different ways. One compressor is set to compress the softer vocal and then has a nice zero output, so it's printing a nice big fat vocal. The other one is set to only pick up peaks when the singer is screaming, and that's set to an output of 0. So I just basically A-B it. I can mute one, and mute the other and listen. And then those outputs are going back into a mult here, and then that output from that mult is going into Pro Tools. That is one way of using mults. I love it. It's a really quick and easy way. I do it all the time on vocals, parallel compression, so I'm printing a big, fat vocal sound. You can use mults to do a million different things. The advantage of a mult, it could be anything from as mundane as doing an extra headphone mix. Like I need an extra headphone mix. How do I get it over to here? It can be, how do I get effect send 1, because this has 4 effect sends. How do I get, after I've used all my effect sends, how do I get to quickly add another delay? Okay, great. I'll just mult my output from that. So when that reverb comes up, the delay comes up and quickly, just take that output, boom, send that to a delay. Mults are a godsend. They're a godsend for any assistant engineer when he's trying to figure out how to quickly get into 5 different things at once. Because you can mult to a mult. You can do all kinds of crazy things. They are a great thing to have on Patchbase. Okay, that's a lot of cables. So imagine what it's like if you're doing a lot of compression and EQ. This can turn into a spider's web of cabling. Okay, and last but no means least, we have a full available user option here. The panel above here is all the different effects, ins and outs, which are, particular to the studio. So you could put in all your different reverbs and delays, could be available inputs and outputs here. They have a lot of comprehensive effects here. They got Lexicon 400s and stuff. That's great. But down the bottom, and I think actually quite nicely, they've called it a user option. It's 48 inputs and outputs, which I'm sure is all available either on a separate panel, which you could plug into XLRs, or a snake that comes out. Because some guy might roll in here one day with his own Pro Tools rig. He doesn't want to use the Pro Tools rig here. He might have HDX as opposed to HD. He might have Apogee converters. He might have whatever he wants to use. And yes, you could sit in here and unpatch everything, or you could just roll his rig in and take those XLR inputs and outputs and plug it in the back, and off you go. Maybe it's an Elco. Some people have an Elco ready to go. They're so used to tracking and moving from one studio to another. They have an Elco. Whatever it is, it's great if you're a commercial facility, or you're even a budding home studio guy and you want the ability to be able to have other engineers come and go. Have it available on a patch bay. Have a way for people to come in and out. It doesn't have to be Pro Tools Unit. It could be multi-effects. It could be their mic pre's. It could be compressors, EQs, whatever it is. This is a great thing to have. Hopefully, I covered everything in the patch bay. Everything that a patch bay does, but please, of course, as ever, leave questions and comments down below. Also, if there's things that you do in your patch bay that you think are more flexible, or just let us know. I'd love to have a discussion about this. As ever, I learn as much from you as you do from me. And thanks again to Lars for letting us come in and use this. It's great to be able to come into a place like this, which is laid out like a commercial facility, so that we can see how things are patched in the real world. And please leave some questions below, leave some comments, subscribe, go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list, and you'll get loads of free goodies. And thank you ever so much for watching.